Chapter 1. The Bad Man.
Daddy?
A soft voice woke Harry up. He was so soft, he marveled to have heard it at all. He turned his head and squinted in the dark. Two big, round, and scared eyes were looking at him. The grin of those eyes was so piercing he was visible notwithstanding the darkness of the room. Sunrise was squeezing her teddy bear convulsively and was slightly quivering in the cold of the night. "What's wrong, sweetie?" he asked with furrowed tongue. She stopped, unsecure.
A bad dream,
she murmured, almost whimpering. "A bad dream, hey?" he said, scooping her up and nestling her under the duvet. "What did you dream about?" He mumbled, feeling his eyelids extremely heavy. He threw a glimpse to the clock on his bedside table. 3:30. Still 2 hours rest before the alarm would go on. Ginny was in a deep sleep beside him.
a bad man,
she said. "A bad man?" Harry asked, closing his eyes. Her black curls tickling his face.
Yes, he wants to hurt you, Daddy,
she said in an agitated murmur, still trembling. Harry, perceiving the tremor, carefully folded the duvet around her and kissed her head. "It was only a dream. It's not real. Sleep now. Don't think about it anymore."
But he's wicked,
she pressed on. "It is not real, Siri. Think about something nice," he said, hugging her a bit tighter to reassure her.
Something nice?
"Mm-hmm," he mumbled, racking his brain to find something soothing to calm his child, sleepiness drawing on him faster and faster. "Think about when Mommy and Daddy brought you to the sea. You liked that, didn't you?"
Yes,
she murmured, eager.
Jamie made a castle.
"Quite right. Think about that."
And you made me plunge.
"Yes, sweetie. Now sleep."
And I sleep with Mommy on the swing.
"It's called hammock, sweetie. Now sleep."
And Halby gave me a puppy call.
Harry opened his eyes and sighed.
I wanna go again.
Harry grasped the opportunity at once. "If you sleep now, we will go again."
Tomorrow?
she whispered, excited. "Not tomorrow, when summer comes," he mumbled.
When summer comes?
"Yes, when Halby and Jamie come home. But it won't happen if you don't sleep now," he reminded her, desperation overcoming him.
I sleep now,
she said, keen. "Good girl." He drew a breath of relief and was already about to slumber when Sunrise spoke again, bringing him on the verge of tears.
Daddy?
"Yes, my love."
You give Daddy a kiss?
A smile spread on his face despite the weariness. "Sure. Give me Teddy." Smiling happily, she tipped out her plush from the duvet. It was a game they had between each other. She would ask for a kiss for Teddy, and him, pretending he was going to do it, kissed her instead. So he played along and covered her face with kisses. She shrieked delighted, making Ginny turn on the other side, mumbling something in her sleep. "Shh!" he hushed her, putting a finger to his mouth, and she, eager, copied his gesture, producing the same sound. Harry couldn't help but snigger, but he repressed it, and injecting some sternness in his voice, cautioned. "Now, Siri, you must sleep. Dad needs to work tomorrow, all right?"
All right,
she said, squeezing her eyes purposely. But again, before Harry could fall asleep, another whisper came to his ear.
Daddy?
Yes, he replied beyond desperation.
And the bad man?
Some uneasiness was detectable behind that childish question. He won't come, Siri. Sleep tight now. He reassured her, smoothing her hair, and finally, by degree, his daughter relaxed under the cuddling, slumbering slowly in her sleep. And as she did, he did the same, his fingers remaining tangled in her curving curls. Chapter 2. Mummy and Daddy. It was winter, not long after Christmas holiday. Sunrise was 2.5. She was the exact copy of Harry when he was a child, judging by the only picture in his possession found in Grimmauld Place. Her curls were black, abundant, and wild. Her green eyes were round and big, with long black eyelashes, her lips full. The only things she had got from Ginny were the fair skin, a cascade of freckles on her nose, and the size. She was very minute and small for her age. To Harry, she was a vision. He was extremely proud of her. He couldn't believe a child so stunning could have come from him, and almost didn't mind the reporter getting picture of her, as they always did every time they stepped outdoor, beautiful as she was. He took great pleasure in choosing nice outfits for her, which she would judge very severely before they could be fitted on her. If something wasn't of her taste, and they even tried to approach her with it, she was capable to bring the house down with frightful tantrums. She was a force of nature, with endless energy and a monstrous strong will. It was mommy, daddy, daddy, mommy, daddy, 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 mommy, 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 daddy, mommy, mommy, and daddy, all day long without intermission from the moment she opened her eyes until the one she closed them. He watched her in her sleep sometimes, so tiny and defenseless, and was bewildered that a creature so small could bring such a mayhem. Harry was so haunted by the word daddy that sometimes he would hear it reverberating in his head even when in the office, quite alone, in silence. One Saturday, just for fun, he tried to count them. By midday, it was already 116, and she kept going strong, determined to surpass any records. By 2, he lost count, overwhelmed. Paradoxically, a day of work was less tiring, notwithstanding the danger and the mental strain, than a day spent with Sunrise. In the evening, he and Ginny were always wrecked to bits. After a particularly intense mommy and daddy day, he collapsed in bed, still dressed, and without any intention whatsoever to move from it again. Ginny was doing her pre-bed routine, that wasn't neglected for any account, no matter what calamity would befall on their head. Was it the same with Albus and James? He moaned, his face against the pillow, so his voice came out muffled. Why does it seem to me that with them it was a stroll through a rainbow compared to this? He asked, overwhelmed by exhaustion. Carefully passing a cotton disc on her skin, she looked at him through the reflection of the mirror and smiled. We were 20 back then, she pointed out, and after a second, frowning. Not almost 40. Her skin was then pulled in different directions while examined critically, and then, with purpose, a white bottle on the sink was grasped. Harry knew to be anti-aging. Ginny had bored him out of his wits with the apparently miraculous properties of it, and smeared manically in every direction. Then she halted and started again to inspect her skin closely in the mirror, like the moisturizer could, in the space of 10 seconds, rejuvenator of 10 years. Harry observed her amused, but then, sensing an approaching gloom, prodded himself up on an elbow and said, "You look lovely, way better than 120. She simpered. "Oh, Harry," she cooed, pleased, "don't lie." As she resumed smearing her skin energetically, pinching her lips to repress a smile. "I'm not lying. You are beautiful." To him, she was even more beautiful than her 20. He felt even more in love than back then. When they were young, he had all this passion burning in him for her, but now the passion that was still as strong as day one, unfortunately, was accompanied by many other feelings. He felt his luck in having her as a companion. All the joys, and even more the sorrow, they lived together, united them indissolubly. And he knew he would have loved her, no matter what shape, age, and looks. And that being said, she was still objectively beautiful. Her obsession for fitness and beauty care showed in a youthful Ginny who barely looked her age. Despite that, she was starting to fret, to Harry quite unnecessarily, over her approaching 40.
But look to all these wrinkles,"
she said, tracing them on her face. "Well, you're 37 after all." He realized straight away to have made a strategical error as Ginny turned so quickly he almost jerked in surprise.
"Do I have them then?"
she boomed, crestfallen. He stuttered, undecided, not sure how to proceed. He knew for experience that there wasn't a safe way out. Whatever it said could only incense her. If he lied, she wouldn't have believed him, getting even more upset. But to tell the truth was barely better. Not having time to plan a strategy, he tried his best with, "Well, not many really. Only a bit." But seeing her horrified expression, added fast, "But it's quite normal. There is nothing wrong with that." She turned slowly to the mirror without dropping the horrified mask and stared hard at her face. "I'm aging," she whispered distraught.
"I do have wrinkles."
Harry sat up. "Ginny, it's nothing bad. I have them too. It's fine," he said, trying to recuperate the situation and damning himself for having said what she did to start with. But this turned out to be another mistake, as she turned to him again, but this time with a resentful expression.
"Oh, please! Men look only better at your age," she said, pointing to him an accusing finger. "Easy for you to say it's fine. It is only us who start to look worse."
Harry looked much the same as 3 years before. His hair was still as abundant and wild as ever, and of a sheer black. Only a bit of white appeared here and there. Some lines appeared too, but nothing marked. He wasn't too mindful or interested about his look, however. He scarcely spared time in front of the mirror if not for shaving, and didn't worry in the least about the approaching 40s. His popularity was likewise unchanged. Since Sunrise's birth, reporters had become wild to take pictures of her, and they were ambushing them on any day out unless they would choose very isolated spots, which was very often done to avoid harassment. However, Harry, unwilling to let the situation spoil every pleasure of his life, had started to run again in Regent's Park, notwithstanding the groupies that were still as fervent as devoted as ever. Ginny was still quite jealous of these girls, but she had learned to tolerate them like an inevitable evil. It had needed a lot of repetition from Harry's part of "I'm married to you, and I only want you," and "they could be my daughters," though, to get to the point. On the other side, Regina, in those 3 years, had become little short of a new adopted child. Ginny had taken the trouble to get to know her, and discovering the opposite of a pinkish background and understanding with horror what her living was principally made of, had taken her under her wing to try to give a proper direction to her life. She had told to Margaret Skeeter and obtained for her a job in the magazine as a makeup artist, as an inducement to drop her more obscure, borderline illegal way of living. They were meeting her very often. She had grown to be so in confidence and had conquered their trust so fully that she had been included in the Fidelius charm secret. Regina had managed to swap Harry from a glowing, almighty, spotless divinity to actual person. That didn't quench his admiration though, and she was still worshipping him and avowing her love quite openly at any given occasion. But being that done in front of Ginny, without any kind of malice whatsoever, and her behavior being totally irreproachable and respectful to an almost worshipping degree in regards of Ginny, he was treated with indulgence by the latter, and considered a teenage whim by both, who very often joked about it.
I disagree, Harry answered to Ginny's accusation. And if you come here, I'm sure I still have a bit of energy somewhere to show you how wrong you are. She puckered her lips to hide a smile and took another flagon from the hundreds. I've not finished yet. Yep, you are, he said, moving swiftly toward the bathroom and sweeping her up, at which she emitted a shriek of surprise. She began to laugh and squirm playfully as he led her to the bed. He dropped her there and jumped in it likewise. Now I'll show you how beautiful you are. However, after several fruitless attempts, he gave up and rolled off onto his back, deeply mortified. I'm sorry, he said, slightly panting. I don't know what's wrong. But then, remembering what had triggered the whole episode, added in haste, but I assure you, you are quite stunning. Don't worry, she said sweetly, caressing his hair. And you are proper turn on. It's not you. I know. And he was starting to say eager, but she stopped him, kissing his lips. It's fine, Harry. I said not to worry. It's only tiredness. No, it's not fine, he muttered darkly. And I'm worried. Tiredness never stopped me before. Well, you are 38 after all. He sat up with a jerk. What do you mean? Nothing, she said, masking a smile. I just said that it's quite normal at a certain age. You cannot have the same energy as when you were 20, that's all. Harry was dumbfounded. So, are you actually saying that my virility is thinning? No, Harry, I didn't say that. I just say that it's normal. It's fine. No, it's not, he replied, upset. It's easy for you to say it's fine, he retorted accusingly. Women don't have to worry about that, don't you? It's only us. But he tailed off, realizing what he was saying, and perceiving Ginny biting her lips to hide a huge beam, sniggered. You are a cheeky little thing, aren't you? He said, slumping down beside her, chuckling. We both got the message, I believe, he added, pinning her in his arms, while she was giving vent to her amusement quite openly now. And since another Mummy and Daddy Day was waiting around the corner, and they were both quite undressed, without the energy for doing anything else, they nodded off cozily in each other's arms. Chapter 3. Jane's Letter. Their life was very much changed
since Sunrise's birth. Firstly, because the silence that Harry had scorned before her birth seemed a gift straight from heaven now. Everything had become somehow frenetic. Sunrise filled every possible crevice in equal measure, in the house, in their minds, and in their days. The place was continuously animated by her laugh, her shrieks, her tantrums, her chatting, not leaving them time to think about anything else beside her, not even their sorrow for Lily. In a way, it seemed as if this little girl had been designed with the goal to help them overcome grief. The lamp, when Lily's name was pronounced, was always there, and Harry wondered very often if Lily would have liked Sunrise, and always came to the conclusion that she would have. He was sad to think that they would never get to know each other, and he was very eager for her to learn about Lily. But his lamp always prevented him from speaking. He hoped, egoistically, that eventually, when she would have been a bit older, Ginny might have done it instead of him. His worries about having another girl had proved to be completely nonsensical. He loved Sunrise with all himself, as much as he loved Lily, and because of what happened to her, was even more attached to this new child of him. The time spent with her was always very enjoyable. It was that period of her life when she was still too young to understand about his situation, and he even noticed reporters taking pictures of her outside during walks or picnics. The time of questions was going to arrive eventually, and he was already preparing himself psychologically for it. But for the moment, there was only the enjoyments, not daunted by any uneasiness. The Weasley family was overjoyed by this new entry. Even George, who, despite every time an afternoon was spent with them, thanked God and all his angels very loudly not to have any kids and complaining bitterly about headache, was anyway always bringing her some small gift, charmed by her vivacity and mischievousness. Everybody loved Sunrise, and Sunrise, cordially, paid back everybody with the same enthusiastic love. Not shy by nature, expansive by character, was always ready to jump from arms to arms, as she hadn't found a person she didn't like yet. Although, despite everybody was loved by her well enough, she nurtured one real and strong passion. "We got an owl today," Jean informed Harry at dinner. They heard the gasps. As Sunrise, letting fall her plastic spoon, was staring Ginny wide eyes. "From Jamie?" Every time she heard a sentence, it was always the same question. Ginny, smiling, stood up to take the letter from the mantelpiece. "Yes, sweetie, from Jamie." Sunrise stretched her hands toward the envelope. "I want it! I want it!" she hooted. Ginny resumed her place around the table and unfolded. Sunrise, her request being ignored, outstretched dangerously from her high chair. "I want it!" she whined piteously. Harry shot forward to avoid an overthrowing of chair. "What do you want it for, Siri? You can't read," he said, keeping the chair in safety. On Ginny, starting to read, "Hey, everybody!" Sunrise let out an eagle cringing shriek that induced Harry to let go of the chair immediately to clasp his ears close. "I want it! I want it! I want it!" She started to wail as if possessed, her face turning purple, tears plopping profusely, and screaming madly toward the letter. "I want it!" Harry unclasped his ears, despite the risk to remain hearing impaired, to steady the chair again. "Sunny, stop this instant!" Ginny reprimanded her. "I want it!" she screamed at the top of her lungs,
but seeing Ginny's face totally unmoved, she redoubled her effort and loudness. I want it! Her face, stricken, was crimson, and she was crying and howling so hard that started to choke over her own tears. Harry, not bearing it any longer, snatched the letter from Ginny's hand and gave it to Sunrise, who, as soon as it touched the tips of her chubby fingers, turned back the sweet, adorable child she usually was. Only a veil of tears and the snot down her nose testified the outburst. Ginny scolded at him. Harry, she must learn she cannot throw these tantrums all the time. I was getting deaf and she was suffocating. Let her have it. She'll find out soon enough that she has no use for it. Sunrise was perusing it attentively, turning it in every direction and looking studiously at every corner. In the end, she extended it to Ginny. Mommy, read it. Magic word? Harry said, wiping the snot of her face. Please! She chirped, all pleased, with a sweet angelic smile. Good girl, he said, patting her head. Ginny, arching an eyebrow, clearly disagreeing, smoothed the letter and started to peruse it in silence. He's fine. They lost the match. Against whom? Harry interjected, looking over her shoulder to read. Slytherin. No way! Apparently, but it seems it was only because... She stopped suddenly her reading to glance a moment to Sunrise, who was listening with a raptured expression. Well, they haven't been very sportive, she resumed, clearing her voice. Yeah, right. Harry snorted sulkily, divining an inaccurate translation of the letter. Hanging out with a certain Camille. Wasn't it Iris or something? That was before Christmas, Harry, she said reprovingly. Oh, sorry, losing track. They change so often, he excused himself. Doesn't say much about her anyway. Just mention it briefly. He never says much about the oldest girl, does he? She mumbled to herself, turning the letter. Then she brightened. Got an A in arithmancy! My good boy, she said proudly. Jamie is a good boy, Sunrise agreed, nodding her head vigorously like an old auntie, making Harry snigger. Sweetie, there is also a message for you! She turned to Sunrise, who started to bounce up and down excitedly. He says... Then she halted, her expression dropping slowly, with every word read, then putting an extreme forced smile on. He says to be a good girl and mind what Mom and Dad say. Harry glanced again from over her shoulder suspiciously. Just give them hell, midget. Tantrums rain as if not tomorrow. Jamie. Harry arched his eyebrows and smiled, promising himself to read the letter later, as surely more than one censure had been imposed from Ginny. Sunrise loved James in a rapturous way. She never had enough of him. Always his name on her lips when he wasn't there, and following him like a shadow when he was there. To her, he was great and always right, and would defend him at any extent. Whenever they raised their voice against him, she'd spring up on her scarce 2 feet high with an outrageous expression. Leave Jamie alone! She had learned to say with a quite reproving expression. James couldn't be indifferent to this devoted love, despite he had indeed tried very hard at the beginning, going through all the stages of emotions regarding this new baby sister. When Sunrise was only 4 months old, they were back for Christmas holiday, he was disdainful of this whining baby.
especially because Harry had told them straight away how to change nappies and give her the bottle so they could share the tiring overnight task of tending to her cries. At first, James, quite disgusted, had been outraged, totally opposite to Albus, who was quite willing to learn. Although, one night, Harry, waking up, heard a harsh noise coming from her bedroom. Going there to check, he found James, with baby Sunrise in his arms, walking about the room, lulling, and whispering something to her. He made sure not to be spotted, and Gigi tried to overhear what was said. It was a very private moment he had stepped into. It didn't seem right to linger. Although, once in bed, he found himself smiling and asked Ginny, who after 4 months was finally sleeping soundly. For the whole of their Christmas holiday, James was the only one waking up at night to tend to her. Albus, despite his willingness, had such a deep sleep that nothing woke him up. But during daytime, when people were looking, pretended to be totally indifferent to her. During the 4th summer holiday, Sunrise was stumbling behind him all day long, crying pitifully if left behind, obliging him to stop to pick her up in spite of himself. She had started to say a few gibbers, and Jamie was one of them. He was repeated constantly. James was very much irked by the stickiness of this midget, as he called her, and was living with an endless sulk on his face. By the next Christmas holiday, Sunrise had started to gibber with more conviction, although not for the reason more understandably. James was the main object of the gibbering. He had grown bemused then, especially when it was found out that on James' lap she seized even the worst of tantrums. He spent all his time at home in a state of bewilderment with her on his lap. By the next summer holidays, he finally succumbed to this flow of unconditioned love that was poured on him without apparent cause. Any pretense was dropped, and he learned to spend his time with Sunrise hanging around his neck. The last Christmas holiday, going to wake James up for running, Harry found Sunrise sleeping soundly in his bed almost every morning. "She had a nightmare," he'd say as an excuse every time, taking her back to her bed. Harry wasn't sure he believed it, but didn't object. James was fast becoming a man. He was as tall as Harry. He needed to shave from time to time, even if hairs on his face were still in patches, and he had grown out the lankiness of a young teenager. Since Harry had introduced him to the running and workout routine, he had never dropped it, doing steadily even at Hogwarts. He had a good heart, very protective in regards of Albus and Sunrise, and in his way, very affectionate and respectful to Ginny. Harry was proud of him, yet the relationship was still a strained one. James was rebellious and polemical, very easily irritated, especially in Harry's regard. He nurtured very contrasting feelings toward Harry that showed itself clearly when back from Hogwarts. At school, he had to confront himself continuously with Harry's fame. Albus, after the forced hesitation arriving there, had learned to deal with it quite well and didn't seem too bothered by it. James, however, probably because more boisterous, or probably just because of the two was the one that most resembled him, was struggling very much to find his own place and felt greatly overshadowed. He was influenced by what people said and published about Harry, and in the month when they were apart, had some difficulties in extricating the real from the idealized one. It all ended up in a great insecurity and resentment. Harry, sensing all this aversion, was pained by it, but being aware of James' internal struggle and hardships at school, tried his best to overcome every time he was back the distance created between them. It wasn't easy, as neither Harry nor James were very communicative, enveloped in their own privacy. probably too similar, without realizing it or admitting it, to be able to deal with each other at best. But they had found a way to connect through the morning runs. Silent and rancorous on James' side at first, but as they rolled on, he managed to lower his barriers. Resentment was put aside, and he was able to see behind what people believed Harry to be. Then they could finally start to enjoy each other's company. Unfortunately, it had short duration. Back at Hogwarts, he would fall all over again in his insecurities, and consequently, resentment submerged by the consequence of Harry's popularity. Once in bed that night, Harry was reading again his letter with Ginny's head rested on his shoulder. "Harry," she said softly to call for his attention. "Hmm?" She didn't speak straight away, her eyes on the parchment. "Do you think James—" "James what?" he asked, turning the other side of the paper all taken by the account of the last match that Ginny had resumed with the sentence while he took most of the letter. "You know, all these girls—" Harry stopped his reading a moment, peering to Ginny. He smiled, understanding the meaning of the unfinished sentence. "Yes, Ginny." No answer came for a while, and then, "Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure," he said, this time chuckling. "How can you be sure? Did he tell you?" "It's kind of obvious, don't you think? He's 17 after all." "Not quite." "Well, he's 17 minus a few months. Put it as you like, but he's definitely shocking as a rabbit, and much good it will do to him." Ginny sat bolt upright and nudged him on the shoulder. "He's too young." Harry arched his eyebrow and stared at her meaningfully until she blushed. "Bloody Dean, I'll never forgive him," he said sourly, dropping the letter on the bedside table. Ginny laughed heartily and then added cheekily, "I might say the same of a person we both know." "At least, in my mind, there was only you, and I'm ready to bet it wasn't reciprocal." She curled up on his side. "Maybe he was," she said, yawning. "Was he?" he asked, hopeful. "No, actually wasn't. You are right." Harry was by then ready to enter in a vicious sullen mood when she added, "Well, maybe fleetingly." "Really?" he said, grasping her swiftly and blocking her on the mattress. She exploded in a laugh. "Fleetingly, hey?" he asked, brushing his lips from her mouth down to her chin and ending up on her neck. "Maybe a bit more than fleetingly," she murmured, giggling softly. Better," he said, attacking her nightshirt. "Let's see if with some effort we might find out that you were thinking only about me." She stopped him. "No, Harry, wait. I want to talk some more." "We talk later," he said, continuing his exploration. "No, now," she said, sitting up, shaking Harry off, who, disappointed, eased himself up on his elbow with a frown. "Did you talk to James about, you know—" "Sex, do you mean?" he mumbled, sullen. "Yes, I did, and to Albus too." "And they know how not to—" "Yes, they know, Ginny. I instruct them thoroughly," he said, less sullen, hypnotized by the way her nightshirt, half open, shifted lightly with her breathing. She tilted her head on one side, making her silky hair sliding off her shoulder, leaving her neck deliciously exposed. Harry was more than ready to close the conversation to start where interrupted, when she piped out, "You know, you're not very good to—" "To what?" he jerked, his attention returning immediately to her words with a slight alarm. "You know—" Moment of sheer panic for Harry. "Birth control." "Ah." Well, I might not be good with practical, but I'm good with theoretical. Believe me, you can rest assured you won't become a grandma before time. He assured her. He reassured her, slumping back on his pillow and yawning. He hadn't any worry whatsoever in regard of that matter, and he was glad James was enjoying his youth. Sometimes he kind of missed not having experienced the same while at Hogwarts. It seemed exciting when Seamus, obviously not Dean, was sneaking out at night time. Being less naive and more self conscious, he could have probably experienced what James was living now, but a bit because of his naivety, a bit because there were many things going on in his life at that time, he never got the occasion. Or better, looking back, he had had plenty of occasion and never realized. His only worry was coming from Albus. He was 14, and the only girl he was hanging out was Rose, who, in the last year, had grown very fast and was by then a woman through and through, in mind and overall in body, and that he was sure his son had noticed. Usually very chatty and communicative, had been strangely private the last Christmas holiday, and when Rose was paying a visit, which wasn't seldom, they would be close in Albus' room, and the suspicious loud music was all he could be heard from the outside, in stark comparison to only a month before, when, door wide open, he could hear them laughing and talking from downstairs. Harry had a quite precise idea of what was happening behind that door. He made an allusion to the subject to James, who surely must have been aware of what was going on, hoping to be enlightened, but he had thrown a deaf ear and had pretended not to understand him. Being them cousins, if anything was indeed happening, would have made a bit of a spiky problem. Between muggles, it was unusual and frowned upon. It seemed a bit more acceptable in the magical community, although usually only by those who wished to keep a line of pure blood. Not such families being many, it was the only way to guarantee that. But they didn't believe in any of that rubbish, and it was doubtful how Hermione and overall Ginny, who was secretly planning with Luna, Albus and Stella's wedding since she was born, would receive such knowledge. And worst of all, how Ron would react to it, as he was watching with increasing alarm Rose entering in womanhood and starting to eye suspiciously every boy that, by intention or mistake, crossed his gaze with her. He promised himself to entreat for more clarity from Albus once home, and in the meantime, contenting himself to hope to be wrong. "We should get James a gold watch," Jean interrupted his thinking, snuggling under his arm. "Plenty of time," he answered, looking at the clock on the mantelpiece. It revealed quite a late hour, and his alarm was set up very early in the morning to be able to go to run in the park. "I would like to go and get it this weekend." Harry sighed. "All right," surrendering to his wife's incapability of doing things last minute. "But we will change our faces by magic. I want the day to be a relaxing one." He switched off the light and slipped under the duvet, keeping Ginny by his side. He kissed her head, inhaling the scent of her shampoo, and he felt the usual contentment in having her close to him. "I thought we could surprise James at Hogwarts the day of his birthday and bring it to him." "If we change our faces, we can go wherever you wish." "I want to go as myself, though. It's his birthday, after all. I don't want him to receive best wishes from some strangers," she pleaded. "Ginny, it would be like entering the lion's cage. I would never get out alive," he said, closing his eyes, tired and ready to nod off. "But I'd like to," she purred, gliding her hand under his t-shirt and moving it dangerously close to the hem of his pants. He opened his eyes, awake and ready for activity. "Well, I'm not sure it will be such a good idea," he said, helping the situation, removing his t-shirt. "Are you sure?" she said in a lower, warm voice, her hand moving on his torso as she propped herself up on an elbow. It might be difficult, he answered, lowering his voice also, but was starting not to be properly in control of what was coming out from his mouth. Are you sure? She repeated, slipping sinuously on the top of him. He let his hands moving on her sides and up to her waist. Maybe we can find a way, he considered. Can we? She murmured, removing her nightshirt in a fluent movement that made her body hard and Harry's breath blunt. Positive. We'll definitely find it, he murmured, just as she stooped on him, brushing his lips with her own. The exchange getting compelling, making them quiver with longing and anticipation, when a small voice, coming from somewhere in the room, made them jump out of their skin so much they both gasped loudly. Ginny rolled off quickly, groping the bed for a nightshirt, and Harry sat bolt upright. The voice sounded again in the room. Daddy, I had a bad dream.